Hello, good morning, everyone. We are glad to have you here, and we are very happy to be sharing to you our special session today on research stories from West and Central Africa. Glad you guys were able to have the time to be able to come and listen to this part of the continent where many have not really shared about it throughout the whole as a conference. So we are very excited to have you here. We have about five person speakers. Some are joining online because of the visa issues. You know how hard it is to have visa to come here. So some of them could not come. So unfortunately, they will be sharing their work online. So we have Navy online, Sarah and Dr. Ifesinachi. I'm here, myself, Richard, and with Dr. Ayilu, who also is sharing some of his work. So we'll just wait for just like 1 more minute and then we'll get everything started so that we shall be sure everybody's around. So I think since we have less time, it would be nice to just get started so that we can really have all the speakers. So I'll be the first speaker today, although I'm the chair, so I'll be able to, in my work, I'll be able just to share a little stories of Cameroon. So Cameroon is a big work as a country, so for those who think I can also say bonjour, comment ça va, so I'll be happy just to share some few work. I just came back from the field 2 weeks ago, so it'd be nice for me to be able to really share some of the stories. So, but the point is, many people are really shocked. Like, I don't know how many people here know where Cameroon is. How many people like what is in Cameroon? Any person knows the country Cameroon? Yes, yeah, nobody knows Cameroon. So Cameroon, okay, so that's a very nice point to like start. So Cameroon is a Central African country. Like I don't know, I really wish I could have like a bigger map showing like where we are found in Africa. So it's a Central African as a country. And then there we have 4 key fishing areas. Kribi, like here you can see here, as a UP, Mabanda, and Belinda. So those are the 4 key main marine coastal fishing areas where people go into the Atlantic Ocean to be able to like fish. So these are the 4 key areas. And then we have about close to 500,000 small-scale fishers who are involved in coastal fishing. And then mostly the men dominate when it comes to fish harvest, and then women really work more with women when it comes to the processing of fish trade. But then my work was mostly in this area as a little bit. So like here is more English speaking, while here is French. So the things are more in English. So I choose to like work more on these 60 communities based in Lincoln. And then to like just show more, I don't know if my zero bit team, but then so like in these areas, it'd be nice to like share how like we have both foreigners coming from Ghana, Nigeria, who come in like so we have the migration from Togo, Benin, Ghana, and then we also have like the locals, Cameroonians, but there are fewer Cameroonians compared to foreigners who are engaged in the fishing. So we have more foreigners fishing in Cameroon compared to as locals. And then next, so like just like don't share perspective. So when it comes to capture fisheries, we can see a whole trend like from 1980 to like now. We can see increase, but then someone would ask, why is this happening? So when I was born in the early 1990s, there was a lot of SSF, like small scale fishing was a big deal. Like you can go into the beach and really have a very big amount of fish so cheap. But as time goes on, these fishes have been going down. Like now you can see small scale fishers have a very small catch, but the industrial fish is really huge now, and we have a lot of it now. So I really wonder how the World Bank capture all this stats, because this stat shows Cameroon has a very good growth when it comes to capture fish. Right? It is mostly industrial compared to small scale. So we have less small scale fishing. So now, but now for me to be able to actually dig deep into my work, so like here, the fish is a very funny system. So when you go to the beach early in the morning, you see fish, because fishers go overnight and then they like 2 a.m., 1 a.m., and then come back early in the morning to be able to like really sell their fish. So like here, you can see people coming to the beach for them to be able to like really have fish that they can like really sell. So like here, so we have foreigners who bring their boat. But the main point is Nigerians who love to sell their fish to their own wives, while the Cameroonians also have less cash. So there is this conflict at the beach where many people foreigners want to sell to their wives, so the wives can now put it and then sell it compared to when that's local. So we like always have like classes at the beach where you see locals fighting with the foreigners who have cash. So we always have this competition at the beach. And then next now, but then one other key thing is that with these foreigners and the local management is very hard because many people, there is no room where they can all sit in the same space to talk about managing fisheries. And then also we have lack of like here, this is an abandoned government, like this is the Ministry of Fisheries abandoned in the community. Like so, I mean, there's really no one for them to be able to like, really help. Okay, it's good. Yeah. And then then one other point, so like one key point for me to do it, to be able to like share is that these fisheries, like many others, there is a lack of like many sponsors. Like we don't really have NGOs coming there to really help them, train them on how to fish and things like that. It's like that. And then also like when it comes to governance too, government don't really care that much on how they can fish. So I mean, this is just the main story I said we will for me to introduce our session and to go to like share. Thank you. So I'm going to pass the floor over to my next speaker.
All right, thank you so much. Basically, my name is Raymond, and I will share some of the national interaction with fisheries and national fisheries. I must say this study is a critical ecology approach, and this was part of my research for my PhD. So basically, the interest here is to look at the economy and what the economy is, but of course, what it means for West African countries, specifically taking Ghana in context. And you are all aware some of the sectors that form part of the economy, and what the economy really seeks to do is to propel growth in the maritime sector and ocean resources. So, empirically, within the literature, one of the things that have come up so strongly within the academic circles is some of the social and economic livelihoods aspects of the economy. Some of these things include, people, social justice, but I've heard so much of social justice here, inclusion, looking at political sustainability, people, culture, identity, and well-being. And these are really some of the key things that needs to be looked at critically within the whole economy conceptualization. So within these few questions that I was really looking at answering was to look at the relationship between industrialization and innovation in the economy, and also fishing livelihoods. And this was basically looking at how industrialization in maritime fishing in West Africa really interact and relate with the coastal livelihoods of the people in those countries. And the second key objective was to really understand how coastal and maritime developments, oriented economic growth policies interact with the coastal fishing communities. Now, within the maritime fishing dimension, key things that came up clearly was that small-scale fisheries were being excluded from the maritime fishing. And this is something that we found really operates within four dimensions of exclusion. One is regulation, where you find out that in Ghana in particular, there are contradictory regulations in the fishing. And then we have ambiguous boundaries where there's no clear boundary between where industrial fisheries can fish and what small-scale fisheries can fish. Even though the laws try to make this, but they are giving exceptions where government officials can give exemptions. And this has been really exploited by the industrial fisheries to get exemptions, and then they find a way fishing in the places of the small-scale fisheries. The other key thing is the dimension of legislation. In this, we found out that aid diplomacy really legitimized the expansion of foreign trawlers in West Africa. This is where the countries really try to meet their infrastructural deficits in their countries in terms of health, roads, and other infrastructures. And then they allow foreign trawlers from those countries that they are taking this aid from really invade their countries without any critically examining the impacts on the coastal people. The other dimension is markets. We realize that over time, industrial fishing has really infiltrated into the local coastal fishing markets, where they capture fish that belongs to, or landed fish that belongs to the local coastal communities, and then sell back to the local coastal communities. Over time, they have been able to do this with middlemen who now really have taken over the entire markets within which the coastal communities operate. And of course, the other thing that I mentioned was through ports, where there are violence, there is intimidation, here, destruction, and injuries, and sometimes death in the coastal waters. Now, the other part really looks at port infrastructure as one of the key ways of conceptualizing maritime and coastal development and how the economy is turning out for livelihood for people. So I have here one community called Jamestown. Now, Jamestown is a very large fishing community and a traditional fishing community that has existed since 1900s. Of course, they have a fishing bay where they do all their fishing activities. From 2018, the government, through a funded project, and this is a project funded by the Chinese government, started to put on a port in that community. The point is that the community were not consulted. The entire community was, demolished under the protection of state security, and the fishermen were pushed out of their own community. And this is the state of the port now. Now, it doesn't show anything that relates or share the characteristics of the coastal community that. This definitely implies that the coastal community will have no place after this port project is done. And these are some of the things that coastal development within the free economy, for example, port infrastructure must involve. And this is the main port in Ghana. So apart from the coastal community where the new port is being built, this is the existing port in Ghana. And there's been massive expansion over the years. Currently, this expansion is ongoing. And the coastal community there, Pema and Secondly, these are two coastal communities in two different regions, have completely been marginalized in this process. Where they used to operate has been sectorized, and they can no more operate in this space. And the port authorities are raising concerns of security, accusing the fishermen of involving in illegal drugs and facilitating some of these activities, which the officials have completely disagree and rebut. Now, with this port expansion, the space that the coastal fishers were given to operate the port has completely been squeezed over time. Now there's so much congestion in the space that they operate, and some of them have completely moved out because there's conflict among them in that space. And then they have no tenure right to this space within the port, right? And they believe that over time, they are completely going to disadvantage of operating in the space they are currently operating. And so this is how major coastal developments, which are basically growth oriented, are really fashioning out the livelihood of people. Because if you look at the policy document of the government of Ghana, they aim to propel their growth through these major port expansions to be the hub for shipping in the whole of West Africa. So this really is their objective, and as you can see, they really haven't given clear attention to coastal communities that operate within this jurisdiction. So, what are some of the economic, social, and ecological impacts? For fishermen, the access to sufficient fish in terms of quality and quantity has been compromised. The other things talk of is the duration of fishing because of some of these industrial expansion has been used, and then the distance they travel has also been affected because they can no more travel the distance they wish to do, and the frequency of fishing trips. And the most important thing that needs to be made is that the fishermen are withdrawing from fishing. That really has implications for the country. These are some quotes. For example, one fisherman said, "We are no longer able to leave our nets out at sea during the night or fish," which is a common practice in Ghana. That's what we all do in our communities. It is the best technique for us, but we can't do it anymore because of the large vessels in our fishing zone. We find these stories, widespread across the coast of Ghana. And for example, let's take this particular the highlight.
If I read.
All right, yeah. So one other said something that is very interesting, you might want to know, is that they waste so much fuel because they have to travel so far. And by the time they land, the little fish they had harvested would have also gone bad. And we can't afford to pay high price for bad fish. So this is a human problem. But the local fishermen now struggle to find fish. And they spend so much time in the coast searching for fish. And the time they come to the bay, the fish have gone bad. And they won't buy this fish. They prefer rather to buy that from the industrial products. These are some of the things that are really coming up that we need to watch clearly. And what are the kind of economic problems with fish processing as well? Low fish volumes and access challenges. The women who trade in fish and process fish don't have enough fish to process now. They are high cost of fish, including have traveled to different communities to be able to access a substantial amount of fish to process. And that really affects them in terms of cost and the price of buying ice. It's expensive. Storage and marketing. Marketing is really important for fish women and processors and how they meet their livelihood, because that's where they can improve their livelihood. Because in Ghana, for instance, some of them really are able to process the fish, store it for 2 to 3 months to get good price, and then they sell. When that happens, they're able to get good price for their fish. Because of some of these things, the women are unable to do that. They don't have enough fish to process and sell and store, and the fishermen they take the fish from are demanding for their money quick, so they have to sell the fish to be able to pay for the fishermen. And there's also a shift in the market control to big players who are not really coastal people, or who are not really fish people. These are business people who have contracts with the industrial trawlers to see the pelagics, and they rather control the pelagic market. And the local government who used to have the power completely have no control. And they are not business people who are taking. And these are some of the capitalist approaches that are really happening in the political things that we need to really take control in terms of meeting the livelihoods of people, because power is really being played here. So I'd like to share this. Okay. Okay. And the social things that you would like to know is that within the communities, fishermen see fishing in these communities as part of their culture. And you can see from this photo, that this is one of the festivals celebrated within one of the coastal communities. And it is in line within the fishing culture. And this is a fishing boat, which they use to celebrate their festival. So fishing is really part of their life, unlike the industrial people. What has happened now? Now, there's social disconnection within these communities and exclusion of within people feel that their livelihood has been taken away from them and they better stay within themselves. The call for community meetings, I think it's important to attend meeting because it doesn't feel belonging to be part of that community anymore. Conflict and social cohesion has completely reduced. There's tensions between fishers and processors, and even between fishers and fishing administrators in Ghana. And heritage, traditions, and norms have all been disrupted. For example, to be a chief fisherman, you need to be able to train your adult child to take over fishing. Now, the chief fisherman tells me that they are going to lose control of this chiefdom within the communities. Now, these are things that we must really look at in terms of our approach. The last thing I would like to talk of is women. They feel their identity has been compromised in their pursuit because they are able to contribute to their family by trading and processing. They feel like inability to do this means they are no more good, they are no more good wives. And so their identity has really been impacted. And the women completely feel like their place within their society has been compromised. They are no more regarded as good wives in the community. These are some of the gender dimensions that you would see. So, what are the conclusions? The prevailing blue economy supports more industrialization, as we all know. And the blue economy in Ghana may not be inclusive in terms of governance and development. I've shown you what is happening in the maritime fishing industry as well as the port development. The ocean sector transformation doesn't consider the context in which coastal fishing has occurred in Ghana and continues to occur. The last two is that industrialization, the maritime fishing threatens coastal fishing. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Ifesinachi from the University of St. Andrews, Scotland. So she'll be joining us online.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Ifesinachi Kafeyaud, and I'm a lecturer in Sustainable Development at the University of St. Andrews. The topic of my presentation is maritime security and small-scale fisheries in the Gulf of Guinea. And really good to listen to the previous presenter because some of the issues they highlighted are things that will be sort of reflected on a bit further here or in my presentation. The outline of my presentation, I will first of all highlight the significance of marine fisheries resources for countries in Western Central Africa and Africa at large, to the threats to fishery sustainability, the impact of depletion on coastal states and their people, some of the responses by coastal residents to their vulnerabilities, the responses by coastal states to address unsustainable practices, and a call to action. So what needs to change? And then I will conclude my presentation. Fish is a source of animal protein, as many of the listeners would know, and even those that are presently here. It accounts for up to 80% of the animal protein consumed in some coastal communities, and sometimes it's actually the only source of animal protein. On the African continent, it guarantees the food security of over 200 million people. And the interesting thing about who produces what is that a lot of the fish that is produced by small-scale fishers on the continent is actually sold within the continent and therefore contributes significantly to the food security of African people. And this is where one could say that there's a need for further research because a 2018 research, I believe by Dupré, noted that more than 90 million people on the continent relies on fisheries directly as for livelihoods, and another 90 million depending on fish for diversified livelihood. But then there are other statistics that talks about, for instance, in West Africa, that over 9 million people depend on fisheries directly or indirectly. And then when you look at Nigeria on its own, as an example, a report by World Fish published in 2018 noted that over 8 million Nigerians rely on fishing directly for livelihood, and an additional 19 million directly or indirectly. Many of those people in the second bracket are those in the value chain. So it gives you sort of an idea that some of these figures really isn't really representative of doesn't give us the full picture, and perhaps call for a need for research around collecting data to actually identify who relies on this sector for their livelihood. Fish also play a vital role in gender equality, in that the relationship between men and women, men as fishers and women as those in the value chain, is complementary. And also, even though men predominantly do the fishing, especially in West Africa, women finance the fishing activities of men. So it therefore means that this gendered relationship between those in the fisheries is something that is very important and needs to be sustained. And then with the image on my right, I've used it here because it symbolizes an understanding of what fishing means to select people in coastal areas. And this was a response that was given to me by a fisher folk on Borneo Island in Nigeria, and just trying to understand why they're still trying to, do everything to ensure that there is fish left for not just them, but their future generation. And the response he gave was that fishing is a chain empowerment scheme. So it's not just about me or the fisher, but also there are also different people that are empowered: the fishmongers, the processors, the sellers, the distributors, the unloaders. It therefore means that if anything disrupts the ability of the fisher to continue getting fish, it also affects other people, which obviously has a ripple effect on other people. In terms of the revenue that is generated, it contributes at the African continent level about 1.26% of the GDP of African coastal states. Marine artisanal fisheries contribute the most, with an estimated $8 billion. This is Africa as a whole. And when it comes to industrial and inland fishing, the figure is 6.8 and 6.3, and the industrial element of it is highlighted here so that you can see that although we talk about industrial fisheries alone, a lot of the times the revenue that they generate for the continent is more or less insignificant in terms of the money that their continent make from them, when compared to what they're making from the small scale sector, and even what they can make in general. And then about 25% of all the marine catches on the continent are by non-African states, which results in a loss of an estimated $3.3 billion. So this is the amount that the continent would have made if they were actually the one capturing this species, which is why, as you can see from the image or the figure on your right, you see that there are big trawlers and everything that they catch is going out. And this symbolizes there's no benefit really for the continent, because the benefit, the taxes, the money, the income doesn't stay within the continent. It goes out. They extract the resources either through paying licenses or through agreement, paying small amount in comparison to what they catch, and then leave. But then below we have the artisanal sectors, and everything they catch, everything they do, go back into contributing to the food security, the livelihood, the social coherence, and community security within the continent. And yet, the significance or the important role that they play is not always recognized in policy or by those in the policy sector. I'm trying to move to the next slide. Okay. However, sustaining this relationship in terms of the significance is threatened existentially by different factors, including but not limited to legal fishing, but at the top of it is poor oceans governance policy, because obviously that is something that explains why countries might still decide to license or flag vessels that they do not have enough capacity to monitor what they are doing, or even enter into agreement with distant water nations when they are not able to monitor their activities. And this is also then why legal fishing is included as a threat, because even though they pay a certain amount of money for it, a lot of the species that is targeted are already depleted or overexploited, therefore shouldn't even be on the table as part of the agreement. And then we have illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, especially by industry sector. And industrial sector is emphasized here because a lot of the time, out of sight means out of mind, because of where they fish sometimes, and the fact that there's limited capacity in a lot of the states. They don't really see what they are doing, or even when they see now, thanks to technology, they're not able to interdict, they're not able to go and see or confirm what they're doing. So this, unfortunately, criminal-minded vessels take advantage of this loophole to overexploit fisheries resources on the continent, primarily Western Central Africa. And we also have the impact of climate change, which unfortunately is very much upon us. And even though this estimate is very futuristic, the impact of climate change is already something that coastal communities are feeling. Coastal erosions, people are losing their canoes every day, their houses, and literally starting again. And I'm not going to see as often due to climatic conditions or rainfalls or other things that sort of is happening more often, that is tied to the impact of climate change and therefore affecting their ability to make ends meet. But looking into the future, according to research or I think a blog or an article by the World Bank, written in 2017, unless fisheries governance improve by 2050, fisheries production in Nigeria, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ghana is going to be reduced by 53, 56, and 60% respectively, due to the impact of climate change. And this is, of course, very problematic, especially when you take into account that some estimates have it that the fisheries in the waters between Nigeria and Senegal is already depleted by up to 50%. This is like presently, so it gives you a picture of extent of the devastation. And other factors is also the development of the blue economy sector, which is resulting in the loss of traditional fishing grounds. So by this, it could be offshore port infrastructure or port expansion projects like we've had in Cote d'Ivoire, like we've had in Gambia, Cameroon, like we're having in Nigeria and Lagos, like we've had in Kenya and Lamu. Of course, this is East Africa, but it just gives you an idea of the African-wide BE project that is happening. And of course, offshore exploration of oil that again is happening and affecting traditional fishing grounds. Coastal tourism, even the idea of MPAs, marine protected area, which is something that is being romanticized, but a lot of the times without thinking about the implication on people is something, unfortunately, that is also undermining fishery sustainability. And then we have other maritime security threats that is affecting or undermining fisher folks' ability to go to sea, such as piracy, such as illegal fishing, because the fact that they clash a lot with the vessels engaging or the people engaging in some of these issues. And if we focus on IU fishing alone in terms of the economic impact, according to the former president of the African Union, she noted that Africa had lost over $200 billion in the last 5 decades. And then the economic cost of IU fishing, but this is based on a report that was published by African Development Bank earlier this year, estimated to cost the continent about $10 billion annually. And of course, this could be a conservative figure given the clandestine nature of the threat. And then in West Africa, 6 West African countries lose an estimated $2.3 billion each year. And this is based on a 2017 paper by Dumbuya et al. And to give you a picture of the opportunity cost and the cost of rehabilitating the species has already been lost, a research by AU-IBA published in 2016 noted that it will cost, the opportunity cost and the cost of stock rehabilitation for the continent from 1980 to 2016 would cost an estimated $326 billion. And in West Africa specifically, they have the highest level of IE fishing on the continent, which this particular report I'm citing quoted 56% of the catch in West Africa amounts to IE fishing, and Central Africa is 7%. And the opportunity cost and cost of stock regeneration for Central Africa is an estimated $24.9 billion, and for West Africa is $137.9 billion. Again, these figures, including the breakdown of IE fishing, is conservative because there are figures that cited 65% for West Africa and up to 44% for Central Africa. So again, it's important for us to know that statistics or figures would vary depending on the style or what they are using to derive their figure. So what are some of the impact of depleting fish stock on coastal states and the people that rely on it for livelihood? The immediate impact is, of course, depletion of fish stock, and then you have the loss of employment and resultant poverty. According to the World Bank, in the last decade, about 40%, or should I say, the income of artisanal fisheries in West Africa specifically have reduced by up to 40%. That's a lot, and we're not even talking about now and some of the other factors that is further resulting in reduced catch. And it also increases vulnerability in coastal communities, both for the women that rely on fish for livelihood and for supporting their families, because if the men are not catching enough, then they don't have an opportunity to recoup the income they've invested. And at the country levels, we have loss of revenue. It undermines human security, personal, community, economic health, food, and environmental security of the people, in that they are exposed to risk in an effort to then do something radically different to make ends meet. And a lot of the times, unfortunately, people are pushed to further vulnerability or criminality to make ends meet, especially when the opportunity is not there, or I guess they have opportunity to diversify their livelihood or opportunity to leave fishing completely and maybe migrate and go elsewhere. So some of the responses is that fisher folk are living or migrating either legally to other towns or states or illegally to other countries. And the impact, of course, is that it results in community insecurity because of loss of traditional practices. And so some of those knowledges is not passed on. And this is very problematic, especially now that we're trying to think about ways.
1 more minute. I mean, sorry. 2 more minutes.
No, that's fine. We also have increased risk of transboundary conflict. For the women, we have, unfortunately, sex for fish or sex for money, and increasingly men are also doing it. Drugs trafficking and illegal oil bunkering and other things. And the way that African states is trying to solve this problem is unfortunately also is further undermining the livelihoods of the fishers because of the policies that they put in place, such as no-take zones, without thinking about the impact it has on artisanal fishers. And also some of the policies they've introduced to address other security threats, such as piracy, also disenfranchises their artisanal fishers because they are reducing the hours that fishers are able to spend at the harbor. And the implication is, of course, undermine their livelihood. And the solution that we're proposing is, of course, that for people to be able to build resilience to their vulnerability at a sustainable level, the government have to be present, for them to cope to some of those things positively. It is practically impossible for them to do it alone without the support of the state. And you can see the figure on your right, which is taken from a paper we published earlier this year on ocean optimism. I'm sorry, I'm having to rush to finalize, but in conclusion, the solution to some of the issues we've highlighted is first recognizing that there's a role for law enforcement, but at the same time, this needs to happen in connection or in collaboration with coastal communities with an understanding of the need to strengthen coastal well-being and environmental conservation. Thank you so much for listening, and I'm sorry for going over time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Next now we have Maybe is a PhD candidate at Ege University, Turkey. So unfortunately, he could not come due to visa issues, and he's still waiting for his visa. It might come next week, 2 weeks after the conference. Yeah, so he will be next.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to present from online, despite not being able to be there in person. It would have been a better joy for me being there in person to really share some of the stories of these community people. First, I'll start again to introduce myself. I'm Nevisu. I'm a Cameroonian. I'm a PhD candidate at Ege University, Izmir, Turkey. I'm also a team lead for an NGO called Alliance for Sustainable Development in Cameroon, and we are working with underrepresented, marginalized communities. And so far, we have been able to work in Cameroon alongside with other partners in other countries like Liberia and Gambia. So I'll be sharing some of the stories from what we have experienced on the field. Like Mr. Richard said earlier, 2 weeks ago, we're in Cameroon trying to get some of the stories, what the challenges these people are facing. So I'll be presenting on the dimensions of succession in the fish food systems in West and Central Africa, and precisely looking at who are the leaders of tomorrow. Like yesterday, we had a forum which I was privileged to be a member. Looking at future leaders, yesterday we talked about the future leaders, the future one, and how to get there. So I have been focusing for the past 1 year trying to look at some of the things that youth are focusing more on youth and the role of youth in the fishery sector and how to engage and keep youth in this sector. So a key missing gap: who are the leaders of tomorrow? So like I said, in 20, please, before I continue, I think my slide has issues. Just 1 minute. Okay, thank you. I understand how. So a key missing gap, like I was talking, we started in 2020, we started by looking at some of the challenges faced by these communities, which made us to come up with an interest on studying these youth. So we realized that a lot has been done along the fish value chain for small-scale fishers in Cameroon, particularly in West Africa, Cameroon, and in Central Africa, from the Gambia where we carry out our studies. However, we realized also that there's limited literature on the role, the discussion about who are the futures of tomorrow and how do we get there, who will succeed the current fishermen. Despite the growing threats from climate change, lack of innovation in the fishing sector, declining interest from youth due to lack of capacity development, declining fish catches, and uncertainty in future availability in fish. This is really causing serious threats and posing problems with youths not willing to continue in the fishing sector tomorrow after some of their parents will retire. And to understand this, we try to look at what is the role of climate change, the role of innovation, capacity development in influencing youth succession decisions in the oyster sector in the Gambia. Also trying to understand how the future of fishing, coastal fishing will look like tomorrow. Who are those to engage in the sector? We try to understand also how capacity development, climate smart innovations are influencing what some of the youths engaged in small scale fishing in Cameroon. So, like I said, we have been on this since 2020. The drive started when the COVID-19 crisis started. We went to look at the impact of COVID-19 on small scale fisheries livelihood in Africa, and we precisely were focusing in Cameroon and Liberia. And through our focus group discussions and interviews with some of the fishermen, we realized that despite the growing impact of the COVID-19 at the time, these people were raising a lot of other comments and other problems which they think was really a big threat to them. Most of the youths we came across with were like, we have other issues, and these are things we think also, if are not addressed, is going to affect our stay in the sector in the future. And we realized that some of the parents too really don't want some of their children to engage in fishing in the future due to the current situations challenges facing the sector. So after that, we had to come back and sit down, rethink, try to get into some focus group discussions again with this community and develop some questionnaires where we're now able to interview 415 youths in 6 coastal communities in Cameroon. Now, in Cameroon, we focus on capture fisheries, and in the Gambia, we focus on oyster harvesters, where we interviewed 316 youths. Now, we use the Kobo Box, a mobile app, where we had to train enumerators on how to get these questions filled by these people through a guiding process. And we in the process of data collection, we collected data from the fishing sites and from the fishermen's homes. So our results, looking at youth successions in the fisheries food systems, in the aquatic fisheries food system in the Gambia, we found that youth succession in this sector has been threatened. And the majority of the youths really don't show interest in continuing in the future, mainly due to some of the challenges they listed to us, like climate change and others. Precisely, we found that 65.4% of the youth do not intend to continue oyster harvesting in the future. Now, we try to assess the family opinions, like the current women harvesters, what they think about succession in the sector. And we also found that about 91% of them do not wish for their children or siblings to succeed in oyster harvesting in the future, which was really a problem for us. So we had to now go in detail to understand why are these people not willing to continue in the oyster sector. What are the reasons? What are the challenges? Given that these people have been engaged in this sector since from generations, this has been something, it has been more of a way of life inherited from generations, and they have always seen it as a culture. Now there's threat in this sector, and we found that one of the main things affecting these people was better alternative incomes. These people think that despite fewer alternative sources of livelihood, increasingly these people are thinking that they can still have better alternative sources of income from other activities. Also, we found that there's a decline in oyster quantity. And this decline in oyster quantity is really a big issue, because also with the current decline in oyster quantity, they are forecasting that in the future, they might not have, the situation might even get worse. We also have issues that were raised, like declining income from oyster sales, declining or fluctuating income, not interested in oyster harvesting. And we know that they're not being interested in oyster harvesting was due to the accumulated challenges, which they are now feeling frustrated because nothing is being done to address these things over the years. And of course, the worsening climate change was also one of the factors. So through the ranking scale, we found that better alternatives was the highest and declining oyster quantity was the second. So moving forward, we found that we try to assess now the impact of this climate change Since these people have raised increasing concern of not willing to continue in the sector, we were trying now to look at some of these challenges to see how these challenges could be relating to their decisions for not wishing to continue in the sector. And we look at the impact of climate change on oyster availability. And we found that 40% of the youth consider climate change to be detrimental to the growth and availability of oysters in the oyster sector in the future. I mean, this is something very interesting. If we can be thinking of 40% of the youth and 59% moderately, with just 1% seeing that climate change will not affect the future. So this means that every morning these youth wake up from their bed, they are thinking about climate change, and they are thinking about how it's going to affect their future. And this is forcing them to start thinking of alternative livelihood, despite few alternative livelihood available in the community. So we also went forward to understand what was their experience, their last harvesting experience for the youth we interviewed. And we found that 68% were moderately satisfied, with 28% not satisfied, showing that already the current oyster catch has really been a problem compared to what they used to experience, with just 4% being very satisfied. So we looking at the case of succession decisions in the capture fishing system in Cameroon. We also try to understand what has been happening on grounds with respect to succession, what is influencing their decisions, what can go wrong, and what needs to be done based on what they are experiencing. So we try to understand the perceptions of the current fish harvesters, what they think about succession for their children. And we found that 86% were proud, while 14% were not proud or were not happy for their children to continue in oyster harvesting. However, these same people have been engaged in this activity through a process of inheritance, because they think it has been a way of life for them. They took off from their parents. And now if we have 14% not happy for their children to engage in this, it means there are problems which have resurfaced, and they think this problem is a problem for the livelihood survival of their children who will be engaged in these activities in the future. And I would try to assess the reasons for them not encouraging their potential successors or children to engage in the fishery sector. We found that first is they see it as not a white-collar job. This is a point which have been coming up. We have always in our communities treated these fishermen as people who are a second citizen class, or people who should be marginalized in upfront, because sometimes we think they're uneducated, they have no role to play in the economy, forgetting that they are the backbones when it comes to producing what entails a balanced diet, what entails a good food system, one of the components of a good food system. And so we realized that this is really a psychological problem affecting these people. Also, we found that lack of the use of digital tools and capacity development was one of their main problems. Of course, we cannot run from this. Digitalization has come to stay. Youth are ardent technology lovers, and they are driven to these things. Their livelihood, there are people today, people are engaged in activities which are closer to digital technologies. And also they raise the issue of climate change, which is affecting the current fish catch, like the same case we had in Gambia. So we think that these are some of the challenges which they say is influencing them not to be happy for their children to continue in the oyster sector, in the fishing sector in Cameroon. And we use a multinomial logic model to understand some of the decisions influencing succession for the youth engaged in the sector. So we found that despite that a majority of these youths are uneducated, however, the few who are able to attain a certain level of education were willing, however, willing to continue in the sector. And I share a story of one guy. There was one this guy we met on the field who is so educated and was an engineer and came back and is happy doing fishing. And we realized that he's carrying out the activity differently. He says he wants to do it better than the way his parents were doing it. So we think that education, the right mindset, and the right intervention can help these people and encourage our children to engage in the sector. We also found that nationals, because in the fishing sector in Cameroon, we have migrant fishers and local fishers. And the locals were showing declining interest in continuing the activity compared to the migrants. The migrants expressed strong interest, while the nationals were not willing to continue, a majority of them. We also tried to look at the future availability of fish. How does it affect influence succession for the youth? How innovations and tools, how capacity development influence succession? And we found that there's a positive relationship. The more assured these youths are about the future availability of fish, the more assured they are that they can have access to improved innovations, tools that can improve their fishing methods, capacity development. It encourages them to engage in the sector and make up their mind to stay in the sector. So next steps, what we think can be done from what we found on the field. Summary, what we think can be done, the way forward as youths in the sector. What we found out based on what's on ground is most of the youths are not willing to engage in the fishing sector in the future. So I think we should be looking at how to solve some of the challenges, how to bring them back into this good sector, this promising sector. This once used to be a sector that used to be a prestigious sector. Also, youths are scared of future uncertainty in fish availability. Moreover, there's also a need to tailor climate mitigation strategies. We should also talk about adaptation strategies, all aiming to increase our climate resilience. This can also be done through novel advancements in climate smart fishing methods. Also, not forgetting the need for advancement in capacity development for youths, improving on their fishing methods, bringing in new fishing ideas. So these are some of the next steps. And thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Joby. Next, we would like to have Sarah. So Sarah is a PhD candidate at the University of Ghana in Ghana. So she's in the Department of Agricultural Economics again. So she will be sharing her work she has been doing with fishermen in Gambia. I mean, sorry, in Ghana. Sorry. Or please, like, do we need like a break? Like everybody looks, let's try to engage the crowd a bit. Okay, so we shall just go ahead. Yeah. Sarah, are you good? Okay.
Yeah, sure. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, yes. Put the presenter mode.
Okay.
Using a very old Microsoft.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. Yeah, I'm Sarah Apia from University of Ghana, a PhD candidate from the Department of Economics. And I'll be presenting on the livelihood shocks and coping strategies among small-scale women fishing actors in Ghana. I must add that I'm also a representative of Mundos Maris in Ghana, where we hold programs on ocean literacy within the Gumua West District of Ghana. So this will be the outline of my presentation. I'll give a general overview, then the motivation of the study, then the methods, then share the results and some conclusions. So as the previous presenters have already highlighted, the fishery sector in Ghana, and for that matter, most part of Africa, is generally gendered, where men mainly engage in fishing and women mostly are engaged in the post-harvest fisheries and also act as financiers to the fishermen in terms of they acquiring fishing inputs. The sector, as has been highlighted by previous presenters, actually contributes a lot to the Ghanaian economy, and I'm sure within some West African countries too, the sector plays a major role. So in terms of poverty reduction in Ghana, the sector is contributing as a source of livelihood for over 2.6 million people and employs over 260 people. And you can see the sector plays a major role in the livelihood of women, especially in the post-harvest sector, and women constitute about 70% in that sector. In terms of economic growth, the sector is contributing over 12% to agricultural GDP and 4.5% to GDP as a whole. So we can see the sector is really doing a lot in terms of food security. As West Africans and mainly Ghanaians, we eat fish a lot. So you can see it's contributing over 60% of our animal protein. And also in terms of food expenditure, since we eat fish a lot, it contributes about 2.4% in the Ghanaian diet. So we can see generally the sector contributes a lot in terms of helping with our livelihoods, in terms of reducing poverty, and even helping us to achieve most of the targets under the SDGs. But despite these benefits, the sector has had a lot of challenges and vulnerabilities, and people who are mostly around the coast suffer this most. And women, as I always classified within the fisheries, as I always classify them as the hidden voices, have always been at the most disadvantaged side. In terms of poverty, in Ghana, according to the Ghana Living Standards Survey, although poverty levels have been declining over 3 decades now, but over this period, we have seen that in terms of rural and urban coastal ecological zones, there have been slight increment in poverty. And that is a serious issue that needs to be checked. Beside this poverty incidents, I think previous presenters have laid foundations about the vulnerabilities that fishers and people within the coastal communities are experiencing now in terms of climate change, natural disasters, and also a major issue with the declining fish stock. And also in Ghana here, a major issue now, the illegal fishing that is increasing, and the cost of production among fishers, and it's having repercussions on post-harvest fisheries, because now women have to incur the cost in buying fish at a higher price. And also in terms of illegal fishing, the use of chemicals and very poisonous substances being used is now causing a lot of fish spoilage, and that is making most of the women incur losses after processing and even during the processing. But we ask ourselves, how do these women cope with these shocks that they encounter? Mainly how they cope, it depends on the available assets and capabilities and even the social resources. And mostly interventions in the sector, since women are mostly the hidden voices within the sector, does not really have a tailored policy to connect both the fishing and the processing as the post-harvest sector. So women are mostly the disadvantaged. So in this study, we tried to explore these livelihood vulnerabilities and how these women cope with their livelihood shocks when they are exposed to them. So specifically, we examine the livelihood shocks they suffer, then also identify and classify the coping strategies that they adopt in coping with these shocks. In terms of methods, this study was mainly conducted within the Guma West District of Ghana. Is one district that is heavily engaged in fish processing and trading, fishery activities as a whole. So mainly the study was conducted in Apam, which is the district capital, and also Mumford, which is one of the communities within the district. So these communities were mainly selected based on their dominance in fishing activities, and as well among the women, it's been the dominant livelihood activity they engage in. So in terms of design, we use both personnel survey and also some qualitative focus groups and key informant interviews to undertake this study to really understand from their individual level and also from their groupings and associations level how these shocks and coping strategies play out. And to do that and to get context-specific shocks, exploring both the covariate and idiosyncratic shocks, that's both the external and the internal level shocks. We explore what has already been done in literature, and also contextualize that in a local community to explore these shocks. In terms of coping strategies, Bene et al. In 2017 did a study on coping mechanisms within the small-scale fisheries. So we adopted that, and also through the first expert and focus group discussion, explored the community level context-specific coping strategies to also know the major coping strategies that women employ. Then afterwards, we classify these coping strategies based on the gender, asset, and gap shocks classification. So in our results, we found out that mostly women, apart from the covariate shock that is external to them, that especially with the recent decline in fish stock, most of them have suffered internal shocks that is even more threatening to their livelihoods. So we see from the major shocks to be major decline in fish prices. This was a shocking results for us, because we were thinking that over time fish prices are increasing, but when we went further to do the focus group discussion and expert interviews to find out why they think major decline in fish is a major shock to them, the explanation was now fishers are using a lot of illegal gears and chemicals in fishing. So mostly when they get a fish, they explain that at the shore, the fish looks so fresh, but when you get to your processing site or shed to process, it then changes color. And because of these illegal chemicals, some use carbon, some use dynamite, some use other form of poisonous substances. So by the time they are processing, it makes the fish break easily. And also the shelf life of the fish reduces. So when they get to the market, because the fish breaks easily now, and you can't keep the fish for a longer time, so they are forced to sell the fish in order to prevent it from going bad. So most of them highlighted having experienced a decline in fish prices at the market within the 12-year period that we inquired about this study. So that's why we're having a huge number, over 84.3% of them having experienced such shock. And another major shock is the decline in fish catches. As the previous presenter on the blue economy highlighted, this is a major issue in Ghana now because of the issue of climate change, and also with the industrial trawlers who have now come in to catch the small pelagics that the fishermen are supposed to be catching. So it has become a major issue that has a very worsening repercussion on women activities within the fisheries. Another major shock that they experience is also loss of finance due to credit sales, and that is a major issue within the fisheries. Most women in the fishery sector in Ghana depend on some networks of trust. So mostly they buy these fish from the fish mummies. That's how the system used to be. Buy the fish on credit from the fish mummies, go sell them and bring the money. But now, due to the illegal means of fishing and other substances that are used in fishing that are not supposed to, and also the fact that the fish prices at the shore has become more expensive, some explain that now they are more likely to run at a loss when they get to the market. So coming back to pay these fish mummies has now become a challenge. So most of these women are losing their money due to the credit sales. Another major issue, as you have seen, I have distinguished between fish spoilage, that's the after processing, as major fish spoilage, and also destruction of fish during processing. Yeah, we intentionally differentiated between these two because we wanted to know their experiences in terms of fish spoilage just before and also after. So for the after fish spoilage, the focus group discussion explained that mostly, as I explained earlier, when they have processed the fish, because of the means at which the fish was processed, now the shelf life was mainly reduced. So when you go to the market and the prices are not good, or the customers feel that the type of fish that you are selling is not worth the price, and they're unable to sell, they come back and they experience such fish spoilage. So over 29% of these women have ever experienced this particular shock during that year that we collected the data. In terms of destruction of fish during processing, it's also, most of them attributed it to the means of catching fish now, because now they get to their processing site before some of the fish now change color, and some too, as you are processing, the ways of processing does not go well, and like you totally run at a loss and lose such a fish. So it's become a major issue that has to be tackled, and some are also due to ignorance in some processing techniques, and some too due to lack of cold storage facilities. That's that explanation they gave to us. Then another issue that needs to be highlighted is the issue of they losing their finances to microfinance institutions and also susu operators. Yeah, within the coastal communities, this issue is now making most fishers and even women lose interest within the financial system, because mostly these microfinance institutions go there in the name of going to help them, to give them loans, and they give them the avenue to start saving with them and eventually run away with this money. So these communities are gradually losing focus in terms of financial inclusion, and that needs to be checked. Aside these shocks, we explore the coping strategies they employ in dealing with these shocks. And as I said earlier, we try to categorize the coping strategies to find out whether they
Are you there, Sarah?
Sorry about that. Sorry. Yeah, we try to find out in terms of coping strategies whether they adopt other formal coping strategies, other informal coping strategies, and also other strategies. But from our survey, we realized that none of them had any means to resort to any formal social protection measure. So they have not received any assistance from the government or even the district level. And also in terms of any insurance policy, none of them has subscribed in any insurance policy. Also, we explored some informal coping strategies based on the gender asset gap categorization of coping strategies. So in terms of assistance from family and friends, over 18% attested that when they experience the shocks and almost lose their means of livelihood, they get assistance from some family and friends. We explored whether some get assistance in terms of finances from NGOs. For financial assistance, none of them had ever gotten assistance from NGOs, but they explain NGOs sometimes come in to train them on some activities in terms of processing and others, but financial assistance, they have not experienced that. Then other coping strategies that they highlighted were they relying on some savings. So about 20% of them had some savings that they could rely on. Others could also I think one of major coping strategies within among these women was going back to find how they can buy fish on credit from these fish mummies. So this tells us that buying fish on credit within the coastal system is very prevalent, and as other women also have experienced that as a shock that has led to the loss of finances. So we can see that this is not really a sustainable coping strategies, but because of maybe human nature and the social networks, they go further to help these women by also giving out fish on credit again to them. Others have also highlighted they embark on temporal migration, as migrate to other places that there are more fish they think they can work on to help them in terms of the losses. And it was shocking to know that over 53% of these women do nothing about the situation, and they just remain there just like that. So this shows how critical poverty can be over time in these areas. Another major issue that is threatening is we found that over the 300 women that were surveyed, only 5 of them had other alternative livelihoods. So this shows that most of them don't diversify their livelihoods, and they see the fish or their work in the fisheries to be their major source of livelihood. So this tells us that, as previous presenters have explained, if we allow the small-scale fisheries to go on extinction, then most of these fishers or most of these people engaged in the small-scale fisheries have their livelihoods in danger, and also poverty is gradually going to increase. Yeah, so I think I've explained most of these at the slides. So the shocking thing, as I want to reiterate, that none of these respondents resorted to any social protection measure, that's assistance from government or the district or any social protection agency. As we explored through the focus group discussion later after the survey, most of these systems were either not in place or were limited. And some explained that some also had some political dimension, that if you did not belong to a particular political party and there's some assistance in any form, you're unable to get access to that. Another interesting findings that we also saw that the informal social networks among them is very crucial. So it is very important that these women groupings within the fishery system is strengthened. Another thing is also that they see these small groupings to be a form of social insurance system that will help them to facilitate their livelihood activities in terms of having a network of trust to buy fish on credit from when you lose your means of livelihood, when you lose the source of your financing. So in conclusion, as I've highlighted earlier, this study was mainly on their livelihood shocks and the coping strategies. So what is the way forward for us? Ghana in 2015 launched the National Association for Fish Processors and Traders. So we recommend that going forward, they have to help to strengthen and also formalize these groupings within the coastal areas so that they can help them, empower them to be more engaged in equitable fisheries, and also to help them in attaining sustainable livelihood in the sector. And also we could see that post-harvest losses was a major challenge. So we recommend that extension officers extension services and training have to be beefed up, especially in terms of teaching them improved fishing methods, fish handling, and also some basic business management skills, so that it helps them to reduce their losses aside the external shocks that they experience. Another major issue is also the political will to address the issue of illegal fishing. I think previous presenters also highlighted that in Ghana, the issue with illegal fishing has become more political. That if government is to enact some enforcement, this issue can be dealt with. I think during the focus group discussion, the women explained that initially when NAFTA was formed, they had a slogan, buy no bad fish. So they were initially agitating against fish that is being caught with they were agitating against light fishing, fish that is being caught with substances like carbide, substances like omo and stuff. But over time, they did not see any government enforcement or any fisher being arrested.
Sarah,
and with the declining fish stock.
Sarah,
Sorry?
one more minute to wrap up, please.
Okay. And with the declining fish stock, they had no option than to also start to buy this fish as they can. Another major recommendation is for formal social protection agencies such as the Livelihood Empowerment Program to specifically target vulnerable women within the small-scale fisheries if we are to attain the SDGs first rule of achieving a zero poverty in 2030. Also, policies should focus on livelihood diversification among women in the fisheries, because especially in Ghana, as we have enacted the close season, within the close season, you ask yourself, what would these women be doing? Because if they are not engaged in savings now, or even if they are losing their means of livelihood, then under the close season, what would they be doing? So we should also target a means of livelihood diversification to help them in their livelihood, like to improve their means of livelihood. So thank you, and this is what I like to share. And thank you, everyone. Sorry for the noise at the background.
Thank you, Sarah. So next we shall have Dr. Yero back to the stage, so that he will be able to share with us informal cross-border trade in West Africa, how fish is being informally traded across borders between Ghana, Togo, Benin. No, he's here.
Yeah. So I think this one is just going to be a quick one. Basically, this is a space I'm very passionate about. It's really, I think we highlighted this course of small-scale fisheries, which is cross-border trade. Cross-border trade is really rampant in Africa. I mean, you go across the whole continent, people walk across borders to do trade business, to merchandise, and small pelagic fish is one of the key products that is being traded within the continent. But often, this is not part of the fisheries discussion, particularly when we are talking about small-scale fisheries. I think it's important for us to really highlight the volume in terms of value and volume, some of the social and economic dimensions of this kind of trade. Small-scale fisheries, and as you all know, fish commodity trade is, it's valued about 110 billion, one of the leading agricultural products, contributing about 4.9% of total value of trade. And the thing about this is how sustainable trading of fish will improve incomes, stimulate economic growth, and provide pathway out of poverty in most African countries, particularly for women who are more involved in this. And this can be achieved through effective policy, expansion of fishery opportunities for these women and the communities, as well as the small-scale fishers. Trading and distribution of low-cost small pelagic fish really generates significant income opportunities for women in Ghana, in Togo, and Benin. Women coordinate all these activities in terms of value chain labor arrangements, the processing of the fish, the marketing of the fish, as well as the distribution of the fish. Yet these activities of women haven't really been highlighted in the gender discourse of women in small-scale fisheries. You know, we talk of domestic trade, we talk about processing of fish, and then we talk about the marketing of fish, but of course, we need to highlight their role in terms of cross-border, which is really important component that has not been highlighted so much within the small-scale fisheries discussion, particularly within the discussion of small pelagics. Of course, these are low-cost fish. So the points I want to highlight here are the estimates of trade volume value, as we've done in Ghana, Togo, and Benin, but also show how low-cost trade and commodity flow links with social, cultural, and economic structures and processes of border communities. So if you look at this map, this is Ghana. Ghana is really one of the key countries that small pelagic fish flow from to neighboring countries, Togo and Benin, and sometimes even far away as Nigeria on the other side. We were trying to really map out this and quantify what volume of fish, small pelagic fish goes across the border, to Benin and to Togo. The thing we find out is that there's so much of this fish going, but of course, it is not known. And that's the reason why the concept of hidden was conceptualized. And then you realize that majority of the fish is processed fish that is smoked or sun-dried or smoke-dried fish. And it is moving because of key social and economic processes that I will discuss with you later in this presentation. So, three markets were looked at, which is the user market in Ghana, one of the key fish trading market, the Benin market, which is just 10 kilometers away from the Togo border, and then the Dubai market, which is really a freshwater source for fish. Now, huge volumes of fish were discovered, surprising. And in terms of quantity, this cannot be underestimated in terms of too big a no approach. For example, from the Tuesday market to Benin, we have about 261,000 metric tons of fish, which is valued about 430,000 metric tons being handled by women. This is the volume that we're talking about. And then, for example, if you take for the Gambia market, in this case, we have over 2.5 million volume value of fish each year, right? This speaks to the volume of fish that goes across the border to sell to other people. But of course, it talks about the financial contribution of this particular dry fish to the women who involve this trade. Now, this is a typical market of fish. You can see the volumes of fish are all key volumes of fish that we don't transport across the border. And these are all dry fish. I think this also talks much to what Petit and who are doing with the B2B and the dry fish markets project. These are all dry fish. And it is going across the border to serve the needs of people across the border in Togo and Benin. And mostly they're handled by women. I mean, so these are some of the things I really want to highlight with you and to share with you and to let you know how women really play a key role in meeting sustainable food needs of people across African countries in terms of informal trade. Now, the key social, cultural, and economic structures and processes involved in this trade. One, the consumer purchasing power. Why is fish going from Ghana, Togo, and Benin? Why? They have cost. They have fish also, but why? The key thing here is consumer purchasing power. Ghana really is a major fish producing country in terms of these three countries. And it will be interesting to know that fish prices in Togo and Benin compared to Ghana are high. So they prefer to buy the fish from Ghana, which is a bit cheaper, and also which can be stored and used for a period of long time. Now, for example, one of the women told me something that is interesting. You might want to know that. He said, well, you know, life is more challenging in Togo than in Ghana. So big fish is expensive for them. that is Togolese, with a small smoked dry herring and the other small pelagic smoked dry fish, so that which is more affordable. So basically saying that fish is more affordable, the dry one from Ghana is more affordable. For that reason, sending it across the border, they will be able to sell people who can easily get access to this fish for their livelihood. The other thing is business opportunities. It's a clear business opportunity because these women are not irrational. They want to meet family needs, their income needs, and they involve in this trade because it provides them a business opportunity. Right. Now, one of them told me something interesting. He said, well, since I started producing fish from Ghana, Togo, for the past 10 years, I have built my house, listen to that, right, to this business. And well, it is a good business for us. And that is who we are, fish traders, right? So, trading fish is not just for fun. It's a clear business opportunity that empower women to make decisions and to contribute to the livelihood of their families. The other thing that I would like to share is one of them. And then this, can you minimize this thing down there? Can we put it down? Okay, if not possible, no worries. I just go see. The other thing is share heritage and connection. I mean, trading across borders in Africa is not new. This is part of their heritage. This is who they are. So you find out that people of the same tribe live across the same border. Just divided by land doesn't mean they can trade together. And so with all the difficulties of international trade, they see trading and fish in this case as just a common heritage, a connection that connect the communities together from different sides of the border. So they are not just, involved in the fishing or fish trading for fun, but I see this as part of it. So they feel that they were divided because of colonial dimensions, not because they wish. And so it shouldn't be a disadvantage for them to be able to trade among themselves and share food across the borders communities. The last thing that I want to highlight is that taste and preference is one of the cultural dimensions or the cultural dimensions of this trade. The good thing is Ghana started this processing called choco smoker. And choco smoker has been really one of the key leading traditional approaches of processing fish in West Africa. So people in different countries feel that buying processed fish from Ghana, you are likely to get good quality fish and you are likely to be able to use it more better than buy fish from other countries. And this is what one of the people says. This processed fish is preferred in Togo and Benin because of the taste. Right? So taste is key part of the driver of reasons why trading in fish is happening, because it is delicious when blended into soup. Right? So clearly, trading across the border must be highlighted as a key component of cross-border, right? And that needs to be supported, encouraged, and promoted so that we can meet the food and nutritional needs of our people. The volumes are encouraging that we cannot lose sight of this important trade. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry, we went way more past our time, guys. And just really lost sight. Thank you to all those who attended. Thank you. We shall give space for the next session, starting in about 20 minutes.